So good to see you all here. As you know, usually we warn the speaker that about 9:15, 9:20, a whole bunch of people leave, or a few people leave that go to choir. I'm going to be one of them today. And so is several other that are here this morning from the choir that often aren't at ADG, but it's good to see you all. So, Bhutan. Why Bhutan? I mean, if you are the type, there's two types of vacations, right? There's one that's an adventure, and then there's one where you sit by the swimming pool or under a palm tree and look at the ocean and read a book. Gloria and I are not that type. We're the type that are looking for adventure, and in most of our travels, that's what we look for. We look for people of different cultures that dress differently, look differently, different religion, places that are remote and not often traveled, places that are somewhat uncomfortable. And so we saw that picture and thought, hey, this might be interesting. But before I talk about Bhutan, I'd like for you to indulge me in just a second so you get an idea of some of the adventures that I've been on. My dad started me in 1982 when we went to Kenya, and we got a tour guide at his truck, and we took our food and water for 10 days, and we drove on dirt roads for almost a little less than 900 miles to Lake Turkana and back. We went into communities where they hadn't seen white people, rarely, if ever. They surrounded our truck whenever we came into the village. So that was one interesting adventure. My dad, I think, got me started on this. He took me to the headwaters of the Amazon River in Ecuador, and we boarded a boat there, and where it was actually a river at that point. It wasn't a big giant lake. And we went down the Amazon for about 400 miles to Colombia. That was in the 80s. Gloria and I went to Hawaii when Kilauea was very active. Decided we wanted to try to see the flow. And so we went to Hilo, Hawaii, and at 2 a.m. we got up and we drove the car out to the edge of the flow and had to walk across some of the mostly dried lava. Our feet were getting rather warm. We were afraid our shoes were going to melt, but we actually got right up to where the flow was. We could see the orange and the red just going right past us, which was pretty awesome. Yeah. And then my son and I, my youngest son, we went to Australia, and we did something that Australians don't do. We went from Adelaide, which is in the very south, and drove up through the outback all the way up, over 3,000 kilometers to Darwin. And we understand why most of the Australians don't do that. So anyhow, that's some of the adventure that we've done that we kind of look for when we take a vacation. So why Bhutan? Well, we're Road Scholar fans. I don't know if you're familiar with the Road Scholar tours, but they're small groups, basically seniors. No youth can go. It's for adults, and they're small groups, and they stay in really nice hotels, not necessarily the top of the line, but first-class hotels. They have lectures, and they've been fascinating. We've been on several, and we saw in their brochure this picture. And it said Bhutan, and we go, where is Bhutan? We don't even know what that's about. And so we decided to look into it, and here we are in front of some of the flags. And here is where Bhutan is. This is India, China, that's Nepal, and that's Bhutan. This is the Himalayas. That's the southern side of the Himalayas, Nepal and Bhutan. The northern side is China and what was Tibet. Better talk in this. Nepal is half the size of Indiana, and the airport is at Paro. About an hour away is Thimphu, and that's the capital of Bhutan. So before, I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. It's half the size of Indiana. Yeah. Uh-huh. What? I'm going to tell you. I've got a lot to say. So, first of all, before I continue, I want to do a little disclaimer. Gloria and I were in Bhutan for 3 weeks. We are now experts, right? And so, if you have further questions, my answer will probably be I don't know, because everything that I do know, I'm going to share with you about Bhutan, okay? Now, fortunately, we have some other couples, or another couple that's here, that also went on this same Road Scholar tour of Bhutan. How many years ago, Rich? 2017. Rich and Rosie went on the same tour. And also, John and Kim Mack have been on the same tour. And Chris and Lily Chin have been on the same, not the same tour, but they've been to Bhutan. And basically, if you've been to Bhutan, you've been on the same tour, because there's only certain things you can see. This map, which isn't very clear, but it's hanging up there if you want to look at it later, it shows where the roads are. The red line are the roads, or I should say road. There is one main highway. It's 2-lane sometimes, often 1 lane, and it goes from west to east, and it's this red line here. And our travel guide called it Route 1 when you went east. But when you went west, it was Route 2. But you had to go over the same road. There was no circle tours. You went back, the same road. So we traveled as far as this area. Yes. How long did it take you to drive across that country? Long time. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we would go sometimes, I think one of the longest trips between a village was 84 miles, and it took 6 hours. Yeah. Okay. Gloria and I were quite concerned about whether we could handle this trip, because Bhutan is in the Himalayas. It's between 7,000 and 11,000 feet elevation. We're going to be walking under uneven land. We're going to be taking hikes that will be about 4 miles long. We're going to be climbing about 2,000 feet in our hikes at 7,000 to 11,000 feet. Can we handle this? So that's why we went to the Sundines and said, can we handle it? And Rich said, yeah. Pretty much, so we decided we could do it. He said, I guess Rosie, a couple of days or a day or so, stayed back at the hotel rather than take the trek that day. But other than that, Gloria did the same thing. So other than that, we decided, well, we can probably make it. We talked to the Macs. They'd been there only like a year and a half ago, although Kim is, of course, much younger, and John's younger than us, too. But we said, what do you think? John, of course, he's in great physical shape. And he says, yeah, you guys can do it, no problem. So we didn't take out insurance. We haven't yet on any trip, but we were starting to next year. So we decided, okay, well, let's give her a try. So we, first of all, began our trip by going to Big Bear. We stayed there for 3 days just before the trip, because it's about 7,000 feet. We wanted to start to get acclimated. Then the first day we flew on Qatar Airlines nonstop to Qatar, Doha, Qatar. It's going east, it was 15 and a half hours. Coming back, it was 17 hours, the flight. We decided we would pay the big bucks and went business class, and it was worth it. It would have been tougher to sit and coach. And we had a layover at the Doha airport. They say it's the winner of the world's best airport again and again and again. It is a beautiful airport, just gorgeous. And so we had a little bit of a connection time there. And then from there, we flew to Kathmandu. And we actually met my daughter and son-in-law who were with us. We met at Doha and flew from Doha to Kathmandu. And in Kathmandu, which is at 5,000 feet elevation, we got there 3 days before the tour began. Yeah, you can see that thing in the background. Stupa. So we got there 3 days in advance so we could try to acclimate not only to the elevation, but to the time, 11-hour time zone change difference. And then after 3 days, we flew about an hour flight is all from Kathmandu over to Paro, Nepal. And we flew over the Himalayas, and we could, fairly clear day, we could see the tops of the peaks. Right there, Mount Everest. Yeah. Thank you. Flew over Mount Everest. And then we approached the Paro Airport. The Paro Airport is considered the most dangerous, technically difficult airport in the world. You have to be qualified to fly there. There's only 50 pilots as of September. I checked it out. As of September, there were only 50 pilots qualified to fly into this airport. What makes it dangerous is that you are flying between two mountain peaks on each side that are 16,000 feet, and you're flying in these valleys with unpredictable wind currents, and you don't see the landing strip until you make the final right-hand 45-degree turn, and there it is in front of you. It's a short runway. It can't hold jumbos. No night flying, and only visual flying, no radar. So it has to be a clear day. Fortunately, we had a clear day and we didn't have any delays and we got in, because if there's clouds, low clouds or anything, it's a delay. So we arrived at Paro. There's the airplane, held about 50 passengers. There's Bobby and Carla at the airport. And we finally then met up with our tour. Our tour was with 11 people. I said Road Scholar has small groups. Well, in Bhutan, you can't even, a big bus of 45 people would be able to go on the roads. Wouldn't make it. Had to be a small minibus, and that's what we were.
11 including you?
Yeah, 11 total. Yeah. Plus a tour director and a driver. Yeah. And it was a bus that held like 16, so there were extra seats so we could move around if we needed to, stuff like that. This was the, well, let me give you a little bit of history first. Let me go back here. By the way, that Paro Airport was built in 1982. Tourism did not open up in Nepal till 1974. Tourists were not allowed in Nepal until 1974. I'm sorry, Bhutan. Thank you. I'm sorry. Bhutan. Oh, geez. I hit something. It's black on me. Yeah. Anyhow, so it opened up in 74, but there was no airport. This is the only airport in Paro. And Paro wasn't built till 82. So people had to fly to a northern city in India if they wanted to go to Bhutan, take a 4-day driving trip to get to Bhutan. That's how remote this place is. Could you turn that back on for me? Just black right now. Black slide? Oh, okay. There we go. So Bhutan's history is very limited because they think the people settled there about 2,000 years before Christ, but no written history. It wasn't until the introduction of Tibetan Buddhism in the 9th century AD, when a turmoil in Tibet forced many monks to flee to Bhutan, that they began to know about the history of Bhutan. The consolidation of Bhutan occurred in 1616 when a Tibetan Lama codified an intricate and comprehensive system of laws and established himself as the ruler over a system of religious and civil laws. In 1885, I'm just going to give you about 3 names. They're kind of important. In 1885, Ugyen Wangchuck was able to consolidate power and began cultivating close ties with the British, thus the introduction of English language. In 1907, he was elected and crowned the hereditary ruler of Bhutan. Several generations passed until we come to this gentleman here. His name is Jigme Singye Wangchuck, and he became the king in 1972. He was a progressive leader. He emphasized modern education, expanded tourism. That's when tourism opened in 74, allowing them for the first time to open it. Oh, and he also improved the rural communities. But in 2006, at the age of 55, the one that I just showed you, he abdicated the throne in favor of his 26-year-old son. And his 26-year-old son, by the name of Jigme Kesar Wangchuck, in 2008, he set up the new constitution government, and the country became a democracy for the first time in 2008. So basically, he and his dad were George Washington to Bhutan. They gave up the power of the throne to have democracy for their people. The government structure was set up similar to that of England, consisting of 20 elected parliament representatives. The monarchy is given leadership, is given a leadership role, similar to England, in setting the direction of the government. As an example, what some of the direction of the government that this gentleman has set up is including striving to become carbon neutral by 2050. They place great emphasis on recycling. When we boarded our van, our guide said, the bottle of water that you have, we'd like for you to keep it for the entire trip. And he says, we have the 5-gallon bottles here, and we'll pour it into yours when you run out. We don't want you wasting plastic. I mean, they were all really concerned about that. It was amazing. The people love their king. This picture is in everybody's house. It's in everybody's business. Our guide said this, and he was sincere. He was a very sincere man. He said, we don't deserve such a good king. So he said, it's amazing, isn't it? So besides the three main branches of the government, the executive, legislative, and judicial, there is also a de facto apolitical branch of the state religion, Buddhism. So involved in government is Buddhism. The monks cannot vote, nor can the king and his family vote. However, there is no restriction on other religions. They're open. Anybody can worship any way they want to, with one exception. There is no proselytizing. So if there's no proselytizing, there's no missionaries, so Buddhism is going to be the religion. There's also, it's actually 80% Buddha and 20% Hindu. In the south, where they are near India, there's a lot of Hindus down there, but that's the breakdown. The government believes that gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. They have a commission, a Gross National Happiness Commission, that is responsible for implementing and measuring using indexes to help determine which policies and projects should be implemented for the people. Now, Rhodes Scholar had, for R11, had like a representative from the government. In fact, he was the head of the GNH, the Gross National Happiness. He was the head of it, spoke to our group for like about an hour and answered questions. It was just fascinating. We noticed, observing, that people were generally happy there. Polite drivers, we never heard a horn. People smiled, they waved. We did not see litter. We did not see any homeless. We did not see poverty. The one problem that I had with our guide, he talked a lot about Buddhism. He's a very faithful follower of Buddhism. And when we'd go into a temple, he was saying prayers, and he was very sincere about all this. In fact, he's so sincere that he said when he retires from being a tour guide that he's going to become a monk. And he's married and has children. But his wife says, why don't you become one now? But religion is an inseparable part of the population's history and culture. So what I tried to get out of him was a definition of Buddhism. He had so many stories about all these different Buddhas, and I just couldn't put it all together. How does this really work? So I had to wait till I got home and then Googled it. So here, I'm going to share this with you. This is my kind of one paragraph of what Buddhism is, or what I see that it is. It centers around the concept of escaping the cycle and suffering and of reincarnation, and by forever achieving enlightenment or nirvana through the following four truths. One, life is suffering. Two, knowing the cause of suffering. Three, realizing the need for cure. And four, the path to end suffering, or the path for that cure. Now, the path for that cure, it has eightfold things. And one is right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. There's Buddha. And almost in every household there's a shrine. And this is a house that I took this picture of this shrine. And they're often not quite this fancy, but they have a shrine in almost every house. And here's some worshipers. And behind those ladies is a great big prayer wheel that you spin by hand. I'll explain prayer wheels in a minute. There's some gentlemen that are, those are prayer beads, similar to what the Catholics have, and there are prayer wheels behind them. These worshipers are walking around a temple 108 times with their prayer beads in hand, usually. 108 is a significant number for them. I don't really quite understand it, but they go 108 times. So there's shrines, there's temples, there's monasteries, and there's stupas. And a shrine is a small dedicated space with a Buddha image for personal devotion. So that was kind of a shrine in somebody's house. A temple is a large building where people gather for communal worship. A monastery is a dwelling for Buddhist monks or nuns, Buddhist nuns, ladies, dedicated to spiritual practice. Stupas are a dome-shaped structure serving as a pilgrimage site, or essentially a shrine. And stupas can be as big as our sanctuary, or they can be as small as a cupcake. We've seen them both. Buddhism centers around the Four Noble. Oh no, did I do that? Yeah, disregard that. Stupas. Okay, here we go. Okay, Buddhists also believe in karma. They do not worship a god. Some say it's not a religion, it's a philosophy. They strive to live ethically. They place emphasis on the value of happiness, compassion, and harmony. Those sound like pretty good deals, don't they? Bhutan is the only independent country which practices Mahayana Buddhism. There are three types of Buddhism. They kind of like, we have all kinds of churches. They have different Buddhists. So the three main branches of Buddhism, this is the largest branch. It accepts the main scriptures of early Buddhism, but also recognizes various doctrines that are not accepted by the original Buddha to help attain in Buddhahood. It also refers to a path striving to become fully awakened for the benefit of all. It also includes numerous Buddhas that are not found in the original. They emphasize six virtues: charity, discipline, tolerance, diligence, meditation, and spiritual knowledge. There are about 3,900 monks in Bhutan and about 1,000 fully ordained nuns. So there's some monks. This gentleman was the leader of this monastery, and he spoke to us. What's that? Yes. Yeah. Everybody speaks English. Yeah. Some of the older people might not, but everybody, pretty much. So, let's see. Foreigners are not allowed inside many monasteries, but where it is permitted, formal attire is requested. Collared shirts. Shoes are taken off, no headgear, no photography in most shrines, temples, or monasteries. That's a Buddhist nun. Yes. It is, but I can't tell you what it is. Yeah, maybe Rich can. Rich is going to talk, and Rosie are going to answer some questions and do some talking when I get finished with my thing at about 9:20, so I can go to choir. So this is inside a monastery or temple. I didn't sneak pictures. It was only when it was allowed. That was an interesting one. Buddha. What's the elephant guy? Do you guys remember? Yeah, Ganesha, Hindu god. Mhm. So the Lama is a spiritual teacher and is very important, especially important when there's a death in the family. According to beliefs, the consciousness of the dead person wanders around for 49 days before being reborn into another form. The prayer of the Lamas are aimed at helping the dead along the path to lead them to a good rebirth. Those who can afford it, they have religious ceremonies that last for 49 days. And sometimes a family will get seriously into debt to pay for these ceremonies of the dead. They spend very little on weddings. They do it basically in the front of the justice of the peace with a witness, and that's about it. It's not a big deal. But death ceremonies go on for days, 49 days, with big celebrations, big feasts, and families, like I said, sometimes go into debt. Rather than placing a marker for a dead person, the families will erect 108 white flags. You see them all over the countryside. They used to be required to cut down 108 trees to put these 108 flags, and they decided that's not a good idea. It's going to ruin our forest. So now they use bamboo poles to do it. Yes. That I don't know. Maybe Rich knows. He doesn't know either. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. So there's many symbols that are used in Buddhism. There's flags. There's prayer wheels. There's candles. Flags are everywhere. There's writing on those flags. This is a prayer wheel inside of this little structure. There's a stream growing down here. And so inside that structure is a prayer wheel that's turned by the water. His prayers are constantly going. This man has a handheld prayer wheel. He's got prayers inside that thing, and he's spinning it around. Candles mean similar to what our candles represent, prayer continuing. And big prayer wheels back here that are spun by people. So what's the words that, and by the way, I said, so do they write down the prayers that they have? Maybe somebody's sick in their family. Maybe there's somebody that has a special need, whatever. Do they write these prayers down on their prayer wheels, and then that's what they spin? And he said, no. He says they have 4 words that they put on these prayer wheels. All of them have the same thing. They have the word Om, O-M, which represents impure speech and mind. Mani, M-A-N-I, which represents compassion, love, and enlightenment. Padme, P-A-D-M-E, which represents wisdom. And Hum, H-U-M, which is purification of heart and spirit. They all say the same thing. Yes. Good. Thank you.
Buddhists believe that there are 108 earthly desires or defilements that humans must overcome to achieve nirvana.
There we go. To say what was just said is that 108 represents the amount of things that you need to overcome to reach nirvana, right? So I want to talk about the people. There are approximately 800,000 Bhutanese. Bhutan is often described as a poor country. They are actually 153 among the poorest. But it's also categorized now as a developing country. It's improving. 60% of the population make their living from agriculture, forestry. And by law, the country must remain at least 60% forest. There is no lack of food. There are few homeless. Crime is uncommon, including petty crime, uncommon. Land distribution on the whole is considered very fair. The government is in the happy position of being able to adopt a space that avoids making sudden undesirable changes to the traditional way of life. And Gloria said, and Dale, you need to include this, they are very proud people, and want to keep their traditions, but also understand the balance and the need for moving along with the modern world. Their traditional dress is compulsory. They must wear it for citizens who have a job in government, if they're a teacher, if they're a travel guide, and most other jobs. They're also required to wear the traditional clothing when they do play the national sport of archery, when they attend a formal event, when they participate in religious ceremonies, or during certain festivities. So basically, they're wearing that traditional clothing. It's not advancing. There it is. Yes. Yeah, no problem. Didn't have to ask. No. I mean, I did ask if it was an individual. If it was a group shot, I could do it. But individual, I asked first. Actually, that one man sitting on the side of the mountain, he was kind of out in the middle of nowhere when we were hiking. And I asked him, and then he was not, I don't know, he held out his hand, so I gave him some money. But other than that, I didn't pay anybody. So archery is their national sport. This was fascinating. So archery they actually had a archer enter the Olympics this year from Bhutan. So we were definitely following him. We didn't have to follow him very long because he lost in his first round. But archery, we went to an archery contest. And what they do, it's kind of like horseshoes. They have teams where they stand on both sides of the targets. And each team, they has two members on each side. So there's four members to a team. And they'll have like 3 teams all shooting at once. They shoot a standard bow, not the crossbow with the fancy mechanisms you see, just a standard old-fashioned bow and arrow. They shoot it 100 meters, which is more than a football field to the target. So they're standing at the end zone of one football field at a target that's this big, and they're shooting that arrow across that field. And the guys are kind of standing close, too, at the other end. I don't know. We stood back a little bit. They hit the target. Unbelievable. And when they do hit the bullseye, then their team member that's down there, they do a dance. It's really something. Or they take a drink of beer or something. I don't know. It's really something. It was fascinating. More about the people. Polygamy is allowed. A man can have multiple wives. The former king that retired at 55, he had 3 wives. They were 3 sisters. Women can have multiple husbands. Mm-hmm. This is really different too. When a man marries, he moves into his wife's family's property. If she's the eldest daughter, she inherits the property. There are 2 areas in which Bhutan is eager to progress, and that's health and education. This is a grammar school. It's probably the same one Rich went to. And we talked to the principal there for... And this grammar school students are paid by the state, or the state pays for a student to go to school up through the 10th grade. Beyond the 10th grade, they're required to take a placement test to see if they can continue on or not. English is taught to all students beginning in 1st grade. Education is compulsory through the 6th grade, but not mandatory in rural areas because they don't even have the schools. Textbooks are provided, but not the pencils, not the paper. They don't provide food. They don't teach music in schools. Whoops, I'm sorry. That's a teacher. That's not a teacher, but a tourist. That's Bobby. So you can see the words in English. Oh, I'll go back. It was just in this grammar school. Welcome to ICT world. I don't know. I think computers. Bhutan has 13 colleges and 2 universities. Many students seeking higher education go to India or Australia. There are also schools and universities for Buddhist monks subsidized by the state. But in the South, there are Hindu schools subsidized by the state. Many who leave the country to seek higher education don't return. And that's their problem because of pay. So they become a doctor or attorney or something, they stay where they're at. About the construction of buildings. The traditional design now is required in all new construction. The design is unique in that the roof does not sit directly on top it does not sit directly on the top floor, or it does sit on the top floor. It's raised. I don't know if you see there's a space there. I have no idea. I asked the guy, and he didn't know. He says for ventilation. Well, man, they live in a cold country that. Well, when we were there in June, it was like Manhattan Beach. It was like in the 60s, 70s. It was nice. It was cold. Okay, now, if you're going to be a little bit embarrassed about seeing men's parts, then close your eyes for about the next 5 or 6 slides, okay? They have a very unusual symbol that they paint on the outside of their houses or on the outside of businesses. They've been doing it before they were Buddhist. It apparently started way back before Buddhism was even introduced. And it's the phallic symbol. And you know what the phallic symbol is? It's, okay, fetus with an erection. So this is what you'll see on the outside. I mean, for us, it's hilarious, or also it's embarrassing maybe. And the guide said that. He says, I know it is embarrassing, but to us, it's not. It's like normal. Well, no, you'll notice it. You'll notice it. So they think that this started, actually, well, not started, but it got involved with Buddhism when they built this temple back by a guy in the 16th century in a monastery called Lama Drukpa Kunli. And in this monastery was a Buddhist, and he was called the Divine Madman. And he was called the Divine Madman for his unorthodox ways of teaching in the nude. Now, young couples often come here to this monastery for prayers and for fertility. And when young parents have just given their child, they bring it here to be blessed. So I'm going to go through some of these other ones. The phallic symbol is depicted in various paintings that can be seen on the walls of houses, buildings, so forth. They symbolize, they tell me, driving away the evil eye and malicious gossip. So there's some more. I'll show you my favorite's the next one. That's my favorite. There's one that's just carved, hanging from the rooftop. We saw him inside of a monastery, standing up about 3 feet tall, painted different colors. It's crazy. So let me tell you about some unusual facts about Bhutan. First of all, marijuana grows wild everywhere. However, it is illegal to possess, cultivate, or distribute. Smoking tobacco was forbidden until the pandemic, and sales are still very restrictive, and smoking in public is banned. Rice, potatoes, chili peppers are served with every lunch and dinner. They can't grow enough rice to feed their own people, so they have to import some. They also have a local cheese sauce made from yak milk, which is often poured over potatoes, so it's like potatoes au gratin. That was pretty good. Basically, Gloria and I lost about 8 pounds on this trip. We really did. We are very cautious when we travel in these underdeveloped countries of food because we don't want to get sick when we're on that trip. So we eat things that aren't too spicy. We only cook things. We don't eat anything raw, vegetables or fruits. Okay. As a vegetarian, Buddhists are not vegetarians. They eat meat. They eat pork, lamb, beef, yak. but they also don't believe in killing, right? Anything that's live, you can't kill. I mean, we saw our tour guide take a fly that was floating in somebody's glass of water with toothpicks and pick it up and set it aside so the fly could live. No kidding. They're that concerned about life. You don't, because it could be your family that was reincarnated to that fly, right? So they don't kill. So how can they eat meat if they don't kill? They let somebody else kill the meat. So if some other person that's not a Buddhist kills it, then they feel they can eat it because, I mean, you can't let it go to waste, right? So that's their logic there. Fishing is prohibited. Hunting is prohibited. They only produce, the only product they export is hydroelectricity. India has developed a good partnership with Bhutan in developing hydroelectricity. And by the way, India is their friend, their major partner, their major friend. China is not. They are worried about China. They're worried that China will do like they did to Tibet, take it over and come over the mountains and take over their country. So they lean on India. The most common drink is ginger tea and honey. The climate is actually subtropical.
Do they drink alcohol?
They do. There's some Spanish moss in the trees. Mm-hmm. All tourists must pay $100 a day to be in the country. Additionally, visitors must travel with a licensed guide. You cannot travel on your own in Bhutan. You have to be with a licensed guide. There's ours. Really good guy. Tourism, as I said, began in 1974 when the government opened up the country to the world. The most common way of travel before 1961 was by walking or on a horse. The first paved roads were constructed largely by hand in 1961. There are very few bridges. Most of the roads follow the curves of the mountains. That's our bus. If you're susceptible to car sickness, you probably don't want to take this trip. There are more cows on the road than there are cars. And that's a fact. We also made stops as we were driving because our drives were from 4 to 6 hours a day. We made stops along the way if we came across a colorful bird. Can you see him there? Or if we came across a group of monkeys, a tribe of monkeys. These were all in the wild. And then we went to a national park, which is a game reserve for a takin, T-A-K-I-N. You familiar with the takin? It's their national animal. Here's the takin. He's as big as a buffalo, American buffalo, and he's of the sheep family.
They harvest the wool?
I don't know. They do for sure with yak. Yeah, I'm not sure about the takin. Yes. Oh, yeah. I do. This one looks kind of odd. It was in the shade, and so I had to try to bring the light to it. Thank you. Thank you. There are no traffic lights in all of Bhutan. There is one intersection in the main town where there's some traffic. And so what they have there is they got a traffic guard, and he's doing, all the motions, stop, doing all this. It's real fancy. He has a fancy outfit. And we said, why don't they replace that with a, stop sign, a red and green stop? They said they tried it once, and the people were insulted by it and were confused. So they did away with it and brought this guy back. There are no trains.
How many then are there?
I don't know. But in this game reserve, there were probably 100.
Of these
Yeah, these takins, yeah.
sweet talk.
Yeah. The big concern is public restrooms. Public restrooms are not conveniently located, and when there is one, they're usually smelly and not sanitary. It's also recommended for tourists to bring their own toilet paper. On several of our stops, there was no toilets available at all, so nature was used. So this is difficult for some people, especially ladies. But um, this is called the Tongza Watchtower Museum. It holds the nation's historical treasures. And one item in that historical treasure is this. It's a Zenith radio. It was a gift to the king back in 1954. It was the first radio ever introduced to Bhutan. The king carried it with him wherever he went. The country is so isolated before the radio, they didn't know World War I or World War II happened. Bhutan began its first radio broadcast in 1973. Bhutan was the last country to have television. That was in 1998. And the highlight of the trip was getting to this monastery. So to do it, it's about they say 5 to 7 hour walk. It's 2 miles to the top, and it's almost 2,000 feet walk. Now, you didn't have to go all the way to the top. This view is not from the top. This view is from this tea house where I stopped. I went 1,000 feet up and walked for over a mile, and believe me, about every 30 feet I was stopping and gasping for breath, at that elevation. It was tough, uneven. And I stopped at this, and I believe Rich, that's where he stopped and had his view. He drank tea while the rest of the people went on. And Bobby and Carla, they made it all the way up there to that monastery. It really wasn't as dangerous as it looked. They have actually handrails and stuff and a pretty nice trail. But that was pretty much the highlight of the trip. Yes. That same path you were trying to walk on. Yeah, the horses are. We were kind of lucky that day. We did really have hardly any horses. So in my conclusion, whoops. Oh, okay. No, well. In my conclusion, I would say, would I recommend Bhutan for you folks? I would, with the exception of that you're able to walk or hike at elevations between 7,000 and 11,000 feet on roads that are not even, or paths that are not even, that you're not susceptible to motion sickness or car sickness, and that you are okay with going to the bathroom in nature. That's my presentation. See you guys later. Rich, cheers. Thank you, Rich. I'm going to leave for choir. Bye.
No, you know, good work. That was really great. I told Dale that we'd gone there, and then I had plenty of slides, and he said, "Oh, I got plenty of slides too," so I didn't bring any of my slides. But there were a lot were the same. It was a lot of places that are just very much standard. Am I supposed to speak into this? I guess I am. Is this right? Or do you need to hold it? Doesn't matter. Okay. We did bring a few art artifacts, which they're beautiful. They're right behind me, and Rosie will explain those in a second. But one of the things that they as part of their culture is that they really do try to maintain a lot of their arts and cultural artifacts. They've got a special school, kind of maybe like a junior college, where they have students from all over the country come and they learn how to make the traditional arts. And so we went to that, and we saw people making various kinds of clothing. I forgot the other kinds of that. But anyway, they want to continue that tradition of their handmade and their traditional way of expressing themselves. Art? Oh, wood carvings. Yeah, right. Yeah. I just put down a few things here I wanted to comment on that were related to what Dale had already said. One was actually in 1985 I had a chance to go there to work for a month, to do some management teaching, and I thought I had a friend that had already been there. No, I didn't want to go. That was what it was. And a friend went, and he said it was so kind of remote that there was no television, very little radio, very little outside contact, and no one spoke very good English in in what he was doing. And he said when the month was up, he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning just so he wouldn't miss the bus that was going to the airport so he could get home. So I was kind of glad it didn't go, but I was always kind of curious about it. So when one of these trips came up, we said we should go to it, and it was really worthwhile. As Dale said, it's an exciting place. It's a very different place. It's different than many of the other developing countries that Rosie and I have been to. We've lived in Papua New Guinea for 5 months. We've been to Indonesia, India, and all these, but that's one of our favorite places, I think, that we've ever traveled. The school that he showed, I think we may have gone to the same school, and unfortunately, I did have some slides that Dale did not get because there were no students there at the school that he was showing today. And the day we went, we got there about the time school was about to open, and all the students in their traditional dress, boys and girls in their traditional, they were out there sweeping the floors, cleaning up the leaves on the lawn, putting the garbage away, the trash away, and they do that every day. And it's like that's just like part of going to school was to kind of straighten up your school. And then they had a list of aphorisms of what the school what the students should be doing. You know, like, learning is good, living right is good. All these look like the 10 Commandments in a way, but they were their list. They were very public for them to see every day. I think they rehearsed those in the day, and then they had a morning assembly, I think, every day before school, where I don't know, about 200 or 300 students, I suppose, were outside, and the principal was up there in the front, kind of giving them a little pep talk about living and all that. And one of the rules was that there was to be no kids were not allowed to bring any candy or snacks into the schoolroom by themselves or into the school by themselves. Apparently one kid had that day, and the poor kid got singled out. He had to stand up in front of everybody, and he said, I guess he had to apologize. I don't remember the details, but I thought, whoa, for the love of the Buddhist love, I didn't know if that was part of it or not, was to shame a kid in front of all of his classmates for having snacks. Anyway, what else do I have down here?
I think part of that snack thing is they're so environmentally conscious that they didn't want any
Oh, yeah, no
plastic or paper.
papers, wrappers.
Anywhere.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And, or junk food.
When we lived in Papua New Guinea, it was kind of going from a transition where they were wrapping everything in banana leaves, and that was going to wrapping up everything in cellophane and plastic. And they said it was a real kind of a terrible kind of a change for themselves. And also the food they were eating. This is changing the subject a little bit, but they began to eat Western diets. And with that, it had an increase in heart attacks particularly among the men. Yeah. Dale mentioned the tourism, and I guess he covered that tourism didn't start until the 1970s, and then you had to have a paid tour guide and so forth, and you had to put up so many. He said you had to spend $100 a day. That is, you had to spend it in the country, and so that could include paying a tour guide or a Bhutanese Bhutanese hotel. So it was just your expenses had to be so they were earning some money off the tourist. It's opened up a lot more. I think part of it also was they didn't want to become like Kathmandu, which became kind of a haven for hippies and for a lot of American and European young people who came in and were interested in weed and other kinds of forms of recreational drugs. Yeah.
How many foreigners live there? And what do they do? And do they
Some of
have
them
to
are.
dress in Bhutanese dress?
Do they do what?
Do they have to dress like?
I don't know. And I don't know if we ever recall seeing any. I read a book, though, that was by a woman, and there's also a movie about a guy that were teachers. One was a British woman that was a teacher, and she fell in love with one of the other instructors, as I recall. And they had a child, and then the marriage didn't last. But it was interesting. It was a kind of a biography of her stay there.
But you never saw it?
I don't remember, do you remember, Rosie? I don't remember seeing it.
They must import some of the professors for the colleges and universities.
Yeah, they'll probably bring in British or Australian or Indian. One of the interesting things about India is most of the people, at least this was 7 years ago, most of the people that we saw working on the highways and really the grubby work were Indian migrants that probably lived in these terrible settlements that, really no hygiene and very little rice food and the whole thing. It was almost like here, with some of the immigrants here that we know, who have all the dirty jobs for the society. In Bhutan, at least in those days, it was the Indian population, Indian men that were there for long periods of time. The gross national happiness, I had some really good notes and stuff, and I was going to bring it, and I didn't get it out of my computer in time, but it showed the various kinds of things that the idea of the gross national happiness index includes. There are four kind of broad things like the environment, living well with the environment, living well with one another, sustainability, a bunch of stuff. And then they got a little further. They want to do it a little more scientifically, so they would interview a sample of something like 5,000 or 6,000 people every year. And the questionnaire was so long and detailed that it would often take 8 hours to go through the whole interview. So they would get the day off. That was the reward, is that they got a day off. And so they have all these statistics about how differences between men and women, between different classes, and how they enjoy life and what their ideas are. But fortunately, I didn't bring that. One funny story I have about it. This was that the main town, Thimphu, I think it was. It's got a little business district, little stores along the way, and the night before we left Kathmandu to go there, the sole of my hiking shoes fell off. And so I tried to tape them on, and it wasn't going to work. So they said, well, there's a shoe store downtown. And so they took me down there. I wear a size 12 shoe. Well, most Bhutanese people are about this tall, so they were not size 12 shoes there. So I did get a pair of size 10s or 10 and a halves and tried to wear them for a while. And finally, I was kind of had to. So then I asked one of the tour guides, there were two of us, we had two that time, and I said, do any of you know anyone who could wear a pair of shoes that are size 12? I think at that time it was size 11 and a half. And he said, my uncle's got big feet. And I said, well, here, give these shoes to your uncle and see if he can wear them. And I never found out or not whether they were being used, but I did get some lean-going toenails because of that. Oh, sorry. Let me see what else. Rosie, do you want to talk about the arts and culture here for a little bit? I don't know if people can see this right.
Hold up your scarf.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that is made from baby yak.
Yeah, baby yak roll.
It's like cashmere. I think that's not on type.
Oh.
There's two large pieces of fabric, or just a sample of some of the material. The women wear skirts or little jackets made of those.
Should we pass these around, or do we just roll them again?
Can you repeat though for people on Zoom, just so they know what's going on?
These are this piece of material is for probably women's skirts or the jackets. Yeah. Have they seen that on that? Why am I doing this?
Further insight on the colors, there was a question about red, which of course in Chinese culture is very important, and its own meaning. And I'm wondering if red or any of the colors you see in that beautiful have any meaning beyond just aesthetic quality.
I don't think we know that. Yeah, definitely for the Buddhist monks.
Right.
But I don't know what it is.
I see a lot of orange.
Where do they get the fabric from?
Well, they weave them, these two pieces happen to come from India machine made, and they hand make their up to use. This piece hanging here, I picked up, one of their big, thing is a prayer rug, and this resembles a prayer rug. This is kind of a cheap imitation. But one of the days that I didn't go up over the hike, I wandered around this little village. I wasn't supposed to do that, but I didn't know that. And I can't resist talking to people. And so some ladies were out in front of their house weaving, and a young man came up. They invited him over because he spoke English. And I bargained with them and bought this piece from them. But they all have weaving looms in their homes, I assume. And this is a major part of their craft. Last night when I pulled this out to bring it over, it had a great big hole, 5 inches wide. So I just cut it in two. It was, that was just a runner that I guess could have been made into a prayer rug.
I did notice that Rudy's got a price tag on this bill, so if anyone wants to bargain with me, I'm gonna do that.
Okay, thanks to Google again, guys. Thanks to Google again. Red has multiple meanings in Bhutan. Prayer flags. Red on prayer flags represents fire, one of the 5 elements of nature. Buddhists believe that keeping these elements in balance is good for the body and mind. Red also represents fulfilling wishes.
Oh, I said, why would they have prayer rugs if they don't believe in a God, or they don't?
Well, they meditate, mindfulness, sort of the equivalent. One of our sons was married in a Buddhist ceremony, and we thought how comparable it was to a Catholic surrounding, with all the little statues and all that, the rituals, so that they, even though they don't have a belief in a God, they do have a belief in spiritual, I guess it'd be spiritual of some kind, yeah. I did find other questions about, yeah, all the prayer wheels, yeah. Well, that is interesting.
Could you explain the prayer wheel? I mean, I know he said that they stand for those different things, but like, does by shaking it, it becomes your prayer? I don't know.
As he said, they were all various sizes, and it would be like if you had some kind of a cylinder, and some of them are stationary, and you just people walk by them, and they go like that, and they hit it, and they hit another one, they hit another one, they hit another one. And they must be, maybe there's a prayer or 4 words they're saying as they do that. No, maybe it's just they're saying it to say it, yeah. I did find something that I thought I'd left at home on the gross national happiness. And if you don't mind learning a little bit more about it, I think it's really interesting. It says it's distinguishable from gross domestic product, which is what we normally talk about, by attempting to be a more direct measure of collective happiness through emphasizing harmony with nature and select cultural values as expressed in the 9 domains of happiness and the 4 pillars, which I don't know what those are. Well, the nine domains may be Buddhist, I'm not sure. According to the Bhutanese government, the 4 pillars are sustainable and equitable socioeconomic development, 2, the environmental conservation idea, 3, the preservation and the promotion of culture, and 4, good governance. Here we go. The 9 domains of the index are psychological well-being, health, time use, education, cultural diversity and resilience, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity and resilience, and living standards. Each domain is composed of subjective, survey-based, and objective indicators. The domains weigh equally, but the indicators within each domain differ by weight. So it's like a lot of the stuff that it's done not only in the United States, but throughout the world, kind of indexes of, or indices of of happiness, and there are world rankings of happiness, and they often measure different things and so on. On one index, Bhutan was fairly high in the top 15 or something like that, and in others that are way down in the bottom compared to the other countries because it's the way they're measuring happiness. But that's the way they measure it. Any questions? Yeah, Rosie.
Okay, I don't think I need this, Mary, but thanks. Developed the 9. Oh, you have Zoom people. I'm sorry. Hi, Zoom. Who developed the 9 pillars?
Probably the government.
The government,
And the Buddhist.
was it the king gave it over to a democratic government? Did those people develop the 9 pillars, or was it the king who passed it on to his son? Who was a great-looking wife, by the way. Wasn't she beautiful? Good grief. I wonder if anybody entered into polygamy with her. So. Thank you.
I wanted to say something about the I'm sorry. About the architecture, and the airport is the same architecture. It is the most beautiful airport I've ever seen. It's just this expansive with these beautiful roof lines, and all of these buildings have hand-carved borders around them, and a lot of them inside. And there are a lot of private homes like that too, but there were little kind of shacks like we saw in one of the pictures.
So I don't know if I missed this in Dale's discussion or anything, but that structure is so gorgeous. I'm curious as to how they got it up there, 1, and 2, how long it took to build it. How did they build it there? How did they get it up that mountain?
What is that?
To build that beautiful thing up there, that tiger's eye, whatever it is, whatever it's called. And how long did it take to make? Did anybody ever say that?
I never heard that. I do know that there's just a path that goes up there, and so everything had to be taken up by animal. And there's still some monks that live up there.
Rich's daughter and son-in-law made it all the way.
No, they made a little place in Oregon. They made it in a little. Oh, Dale's. I'm sorry, Dale. You said Rich. Yeah. Yeah, right. My son that was married in a Buddhist ceremony. It was in Oregon. I thought it was kind of confusing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of people will make it to the top. I just was beginning to have my sciatic pain, and I decided I better stop at that point.
The top is what, 7,000, 9,000, 11,000 feet?
The top here, I think it's more like 7,000 or 9,000. There are mountains in Bhutan that are 23,000 feet. The highest unclimbed mountain in the world is in Bhutan. Yeah.
Whereas where is Kathmandu?
Nepal.
Nepal. In Nepal opens up their mountains and lets tourists and public climb, and Bhutan doesn't want that to happen to their country because they see how it's been trashed.
Many of you have seen pictures of those camping sites in Nepal. It's just a mess. People just leave their tents and their oxygen tanks and all of the things that they've used to climb. And imagine how many tourists there are doing that. And paper and trash and plastic. It's just a mess. We went to a museum that, and this was one of the art displays in the museum, just trash all over the floor. And Bhutan is making a really successful effort at not allowing that to happen there.
Sorry.
Well, I was just wondering about domestic animals, cats, dogs, strays. Did you see any animals in homes or in streets?
Did we see any animals, like domestic animals like cats and dogs? I do recall seeing some dogs, but I couldn't really, it wasn't something like the cats in Rome or wherever that is and that they have. Any other questions? Well, if you get a chance, you ought to take a tour.
Sorry. What language do they speak there?
Well,
I mean, besides English.
That I had written it down somewhere. I wrote an article about it one time, and I can't find it in my article. But it's something like gong drag gong or something like that, and it's apparently a kind of a Hindu or Hindi-based language. I think, I'm not sure. Yeah. And many of them speak English, as Dale said.
I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much for pitching in. Next week, we're going to be watching a video about, it's kind of, well, whatever, about the, oh, Rosie's got another comment.
I remembered it. Netflix has a movie on, a documentary on Bhutan. It's worth looking at too.
No, great to know. Next week, we're going to be watching a movie that talks about how the Nazis indoctrinated the German people in order to get them to go along with the final solution. So I think it'll be interesting. It's something to, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. So anyways, and then the following week, over Thanksgiving, we're going to be doing, we kind of talked about it before, we're going to be doing conversations about kindness and gratitude. That's what we're going to do on Thanksgiving week. So we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for coming.